On April 19, 2025, an extraordinary phenomenon unfolded across the United States. From the cold urban sprawl of New York City to the sunlit suburbs of Los Angeles and the tense political climate of Florida, hundreds of thousands of Americans gathered in protest. They rallied not for a single cause, but against what many perceived as a systematic dismantling of American democracy under former President Donald Trump's second term. This movement, known as 50,501, represented more than just a protest. It was a reckoning and awakening of discontent and civic defiance amid rising authoritarianism, culture wars, economic disparity, and environmental collapse. Spanning 50 states in a unified day of action, it may be remembered as one of the largest grassroots uprisings in modern American history. The seeds of 50,501 were planted long before the spring of 2025, following Trump's controversial re-election. A new wave of executive actions, including the use of the Alien Enemies Act for mass deportations, aggressive defunding of social programs, and escalating rhetoric against perceived internal threats, stirred widespread unease. Across campuses, synagogues, mosques, town halls, and online forums, citizens began to organize. Protest coordinators from different cities collaborated via encrypted channels, sharing documents, protest templates, and fundraising strategies. The result was an intricate tapestry of activism woven across political, racial, and religious lines. In Bryant Park, New York City, over 70,000 people gathered under gray skies. Among them were immigrants, students, health workers, and Holocaust survivors, an intersection of history and activism. Placards read, "No one is illegal. My grandfather fled Nazis, now I fight fascism, and we are not the enemy." The march from Bryant Park to Union Square was peaceful but intense, monitored closely by NYPD drones. Amid chants, spoken word poetry, and street theater, stories were shared, stories of families torn apart, rights stripped away, and resistance born in kitchens and classrooms. La's protests stood out for their creativity. Hollywood figures joined forces with grassroots activists in a day-long protest concert dubbed Voices United. Protest art installations dotted the city, a 30-foot papier-mâché puppet of Lady Liberty caged in wire, murals honoring detained immigrants, and dance performances depicting racial injustice. One powerful installation, titled The Line, recreated a mock immigration checkpoint where protesters role-played ICE raids, bringing many to tears. In Miami, the protests took a grimmer turn. Florida, governed under stringent right-wing policies, saw increased surveillance and a heavy police presence. Dissenters were met with threats of arrest, and several organizers faced legal consequences before the protests even began. Yet, the turnout was massive. Faith groups played a key role in keeping peace. Black churches organized freedom marches, while Cuban and Haitian communities who understood dictatorship all too well marched in solidarity. Behind the scenes, organizing 50,501 was a monumental task. Leaders included students, former congressional aides, immigrants, and even veterans. Through digital security workshops, Zoom calls, and late-night planning sessions, they stitched together an unprecedented national movement. Organizations like Liberty Roots, UndocuSafe, and Guardians of the Vote coordinated legal aid, protest safety trainings, and even AI-guided de-escalation simulations. Rashida El Sayed, a Muslim-American teacher in Michigan, became a protest leader after students in her school faced deportation threats. Carlos Mendoza, a former Marine, marched in Phoenix holding a sign, "I served for liberty, not tyranny." Hannah Glick, an Orthodox Jewish mother of 4, came out to protest for the first time in her life, calling the current policies eerily familiar. The federal response was swift and measured at first. Federal agencies monitored protest communications, and several Republican senators dismissed the protests as woke tantrums. Meanwhile, Trump himself tweeted dismissively, calling protesters weaklings and anarchists. In some cities, National Guard units were placed on standby and anti-riot laws were invoked. Arrests were made in Houston, Charlotte, and Boise. However, images of police overreach further galvanized the movement. The 50,501 protests didn't exist in a vacuum. They were the climax of a cultural shift. American music, art, and literature were already turning subversive. Underground zines, viral protest TikToks, decentralized podcasts, and campus-based resistance theaters became lifelines of expression. Academics debated soft fascism, while comedians turned into political commentators. Churches and mosques, once divided by creed, found unity in protest. While no single policy changed overnight, the ripple effects were massive. Several states halted cooperation with federal deportation operations. Media outlets began investigations into surveillance and ICE abuses. Young voter registration spiked by 39% in the weeks after April 19th. Most importantly, the nation had been stirred. The myth of political apathy was shattered. The question lingered in the smoke-filled streets and echoing protest chants. What comes next? The 50,501 organizers formed coalitions to push legislative reform, while others pivoted to long-term civic education. The protests also birthed a new class of young leaders and brought unlikely alliances, suburban moms, anarchist youth, and middle-aged veterans together in one cause. In the face of increasing government pressure, these communities doubled down on resilience, empathy, and direct action. April 19, 2025 may be remembered as the day Americans reclaimed their voice. Not through violence or insurrection, but through unity, courage, and storytelling. The 50,501 movement reminded the world that democracy is not a given, it is defended by action, compassion, and the unwavering belief in freedom. Subscribe, like, share, and look out for more.